Hey there, welcome to episode 61 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. This episode 61 is being recorded on the it's about 3:30. 3:30 p.m., the afternoon of April 19, 2024. Happy Friday. This week's episode is entitled One Small Step for Plan. Do you see what I did there? It is the first episode after last week, Making It Rain, where I suggested that I need to start talking about what we are doing, not what we want to do. So less aspiration, maybe more of a status update. So let's go, because these are important things. Summary, putting together infrastructure plans for our org and some old school methodologies for outreach to other organizations to build up the civic volunteer engagement, which is lacking. We have our work cut out for us. So neither of the things that I'm going to cover today are particularly interesting for the casual listener. So there isn't much to see, which I'll get into that behind the scenes kind of things at the moment. But these are active development right now. First, a couple of links. Hopefully you found our audio program somewhere that displays our episode description. So under the show notes, hopefully you will see a links section, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation website, innovateforvegas.org. Visit that at your leisure. Our GitHub repositories are in our GitHub organization, Innovate for Vegas, just like our domain name. By the way, because we're a 501c3 nonprofit public charity, although I think GitHub is a little bit less pedantic about that if you're a nonprofit, we get, and I'm not being paid to say this, but GitHub gives us a free team tier with lots of cool features. So one of the benefits of doing the paperwork and the process of becoming a standalone nonprofit, you get to just reach out to companies, and some like GitHub and even Google through TechSoup and others enable your organization with some free or severely discounted services. Same goes for Canva, which I use to create our cover art, among other things. So canva.com, pretty cool. Free stuff for nonprofits, enabling our efforts to make our communities better. I will talk later about our Project ACT, ACT. There's a GitHub org for that, set up for free. It's basically under the Innovate for Vegas users, I guess. It is a project that we're pursuing, which we started talking about over a year ago, which is absolutely critical now. And so it's getting tier 0 attention to get our projects moving. So I'll get into that in a moment. Project ACT. Now there is another ACT, and I've talked about this before actually in previous episodes. The Alliance of Civic Technologists. This is not that. We actually had the name before they did. We're not upset or anything, but if there is confusion, Project ACT, which is, we refer to it as Project-ACT. There you go. Anyway, I've linked to terraform.io and to opentofu.org, and I'll get into why. These are infrastructure as code platforms. Terraform from HashiCorp. HashiCorp changed their licensing. Whenever there's a material change to something like that, the open source ecosystem shudders. There are quakes felt. The temperatures rise. The oceans do as well, etc. So with the license change to a source available, but they really don't want you to make money on their platform, basically building your product on their product and doing it for free, and then you make money. This is not an uncommon problem. It's one we'll see more of. One of the reasons that we are taking our projects out into the world under a GPL v3 license, for example, is so that attribution and source availability do not enable people to use the work of civic volunteers without giving full credit and showing what was used and what was changed and so on. And these are not magic. That's the motivation. So in the case of HashiCorp, they relicensed their Terraform and all of their other tools, Vagrant, Packer, Console, Vault. There's probably more under business source license. And I think there's another one, but BSL. So this angered some people. So the Linux Foundation got behind the forking of the project from their last true open source. And it was either Mozilla or BSD3 clause. I cannot remember at this moment, but that's not really important. OpenTofu is a fork of Terraform, so they get to use TF as the file name extension. So .tf for Terraform, .tf for OpenTofu. They do have the backing, the support of the Linux Foundation, so I guess that's nice. There's already been some controversy about whether some code was improperly migrated from the post-license change tree of Terraform into OpenTofu, but we'll see how that shakes out. But it is important to be aware of both of these, for example, which I will get into later. And then the technical debt link on Wikipedia, so you have some familiarity with that when I mention it. Basically, you know how debt works for money. Anytime someone writes, okay, if you're not a software person or if you're not, maybe even a hardware person, Apple is good at this. They release a product that is not quite, I mean, it's very cool, but there are some very weird things about it. So the technical debt is, let's ship this now. Let's get some responses from our fan community. There are people that will be in be in line to buy the version 1 of an Apple product, which those of us who've been around know you never do. So the people that buy version 1 will tell us which technical debt items we need to address first. So the Vision Pro thing, the strap situation makes it uncomfortable, gives people headaches after a while. The pass-through glass camera trick thing doesn't seem to really be so appealing, etc. So whenever you do something, whenever you're developing a product or a service or whatever, especially in the technical world, but this can apply elsewhere, I guess. In the tech sector, things you do today may be long-lasting, long into the future. So it's important to be, and if you don't tackle technical debt early, then you will spend more time trying to fix the technical debt issues that have built up than you do trying to address new features or keeping your customers or users, etc. So it's something to think about. And it's particularly challenging with open source projects. The way you get around that is you have other eyeballs, other users, other people who benefit from the platforms and the tools and the software and the hardware and whatever you're making, so that they can say, hey, I use your thing and I'm going to take my time to, I'm going to give you my time to tell you, describe a situation, tell you about a bug, tell you about an issue, offer a suggestion for improvement, etc. And so sometimes you're able to identify even technical debt you didn't know about, and thanks to the help of others, the community, and maybe they can even offer a fix if they're so inclined or so enabled. The GitHub pull request model is not wonderful, but it does. It comes in handy for a way to have people who are not formally part of a project contribute what's called a pull request. So you can say, hey, here's some changes that I have made to my version of your project. So they clone it, they fork it. So they say, here is a pull request. I would like you to pull my changes into your repository, into your project. So it could be something as simple as, hey, I changed some wording. I've edited your documentation. It could be, hey, I fixed your icons. It could be, I changed some code. It could be anything. So it's useful for what it is. It's not great, but yeah. So we'll leave that there. So pull requests are encouraged, by the way, for our organization, but you have to actually put some thought into it. So rampant pull requests are becoming a thing, apparently. Luckily, we have maintained our below-the-radar status. Anyway, those are the links. And so let us begin with the show, which will be mostly about these things that I've just mentioned. So make it clear. Oh, by the way, they're about these things because a tremendous amount of value in our future is based on things we're doing right now and whether we can attract or encourage talent, civic volunteers from other places who may be in a similar situation with a dearth of civic volunteer participation in their locality. If we can actually discover each other and collaborate on the commonality between our projects, then perhaps we can all benefit from the few people who are actually focused, dedicated, capable, interested. Take your pick. So make it clear, starting off with a reproducible infrastructure to underpin our deployments. It makes it easier to work with smaller transitional teams. Transient teams are difficult. Transitional teams would be nice. Transient teams where people kind of come and go as they please. Ideally, a transitional team will be like, hey, I'm not going to work on this after the version 3 or something, right? So your participants will ramp up, ramp down, hand off, etc. But starting off with a reproducible infrastructure, so that means we can deploy our stuff, our apps, our systems, our development environments, probably going to make heavy use of dev containers. And in fact, a little inside baseball, I guess, kind of looking at NixOS as a container starting point, as the base our containers on NixOS. And thus we can also base our, if we have EC2 instances or servers, or if we have other containers, deployment containers, dev containers. The NixOS is interesting because the way it does the sort of release and snapshotting and consistent builds. There are other ways to do this as well, so I'm not saying it will be Nix, but it's an interesting thing to look at. There are a few different projects that are looking at immutable, reproducible, etc. Immutable builds are nice. You build once, you deploy, and then it reduces, mitigates. It doesn't, it's not bulletproof. Nothing is, but it makes it slightly less easy to make changes to the deployed platform, the runtime. So from a software perspective, interesting things. But anyway, make it clear so that we have infrastructure that we can that is visible, that is observable, so that if someone joins a project, they are not lost. If a person that's working on the infrastructure departs the project, they don't leave it in a state where people say, how does this work? And that's true in general. Whenever, and by the way, this is a job skill as well. Whenever one person knows how a system works and that person disappears, which people are wont to do in the greater Vegas area, hopefully this doesn't impact you where you are. All participants in a project suffer. There's downtime and a loss of productivity, and it can be a little confusing, frustrating. So the same goes for all aspects of our project. So not only our base infrastructure, which is the thing we're working on right now, but and so we'll use infrastructure as code rather than, and I have a war story, which I'll get to in a second, and being clear about what is where and how everything is connected. It's a reduction in technical debt. In most cases, or it could be a deferment depending on how things are put together. War story, actual project client. This is not my project. I was working I was an external consultant. Actual client set up their Amazon Web Services deployment with completely 100% top to bottom, all of it through the console, the web-based user interface for Amazon Web Services. If you've ever used that, you know that it's mildly frustrating at best, and it can get worse from there. But it is pointing and clicking at things. And so when you ask someone, can you reproduce this infrastructure? Can we build a copy of your deployment somewhere else in a different set of accounts or a different region or whatever it is? Can we rebuild this today? And the answer is, well, we have to go through and start clicking on things. That makes it very difficult to add a team member. It makes it very difficult to do exactly the rebuilding of an infrastructure. You want to build a test build. You want to, or test environment. You want to deploy a backup copy of it in another country, another region. any number of completely valid and obvious, in some cases, reasons that you'd want to be able to reconstruct something. The world of infrastructure as code has come a long way. Terraform is not the only thing. Each of the main providers of service, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, even Oracle, they have various tools in place. And then I don't want to say smaller, but the less well-known, I suppose. They are smaller in infrastructure size, but if ever there's a level playing field out there, it's when you can reproduce your infrastructure on a completely different service provider platform, right? So I want to take my AWS infrastructure and deploy it to an Azure cloud. Some people say Azure. I don't know. Azure, like the color. If you're thinking Mediterranean, you might say Côte d'Azur, so you would say Azure. But the ability to deploy infrastructure with hopefully minimal changes. But if you've abstracted things correctly, or for you, hey, I want a server, I want a load balancer, I want gateways, I want databases, and if you can configure that conceptually using your infrastructure as code tooling, and then you can turn each of those blocks, each of the items in your infrastructure architecture, in your floor plan, if you like, you can take each of those things and turn them into actual features of the particular platform. So if I'm on AWS and I want to deploy a Postgres database and a server instance behind near a street, don't forget, server, an EC2 instance on the case of Amazon. If I want to deploy a computer behind a load balancer and be able to add another computer behind it and set up a static IP address, on Amazon, it's a collection of features that they offer. And on Azure, it might be differently named, differently configured, different parameters, etc. But conceptually, I should be able to do exactly the same thing. So if I've turned my infrastructure into reusable, or at least almost reusable, understandable code, tools, methods, if I've made it such that I'm not telling someone, well, first you have to go to the website and click on this, which is not an ideal start. So that is the main focus right now. There's an infrastructure project that I personally was working on. So that is the fundamental base, the starting point for what we're doing here. And I want to make sure that it is exactly that, clear, so that people can jump in if they need to and make use of it. And ideally, if we can move it to another cloud provider, DreamHost, DigitalOcean, Akamai, formerly Linode, and obviously Google, what is it? What is it called? Google App Cloud? No, whatever it is. Microsoft Azure, etc. So, right, being stuck on one platform, as in stuck, like, in order to move, it will take 20 days and we don't have anyone to do it. That can cause problems. That's technical debt. So this is a low-hanging fruit to tackle right up front. So that's one of the things, and making it clear so that someone joining our projects from other places can be aware, they may not have to edit anything, but they may need to understand, okay, this is how this works. And this happened again with that project I mentioned. So understanding which features of the cloud they're making use of, how it's connected, where we have to pay attention to where data is stored, where their logs are, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding the configuration is useful across the board, and making it clear is a first step in doing that. Making it reproducible, making it portable, these are nice too. So that brings us to the second item: make it reusable. So if you make your first of all, if I've been searching around other organizations, other projects, I've taken a look at them. Number one problem is that a lot of projects have become spider websites, as the saying goes. The GitHub repo is years since the last change was committed. If there's a website associated with it, it might be gone. It might still be there, but it's, maybe they have some dates on there that are from pre-pandemic times. So the projects are difficult to track down in a usable state, much less reusable. So if civic volunteers are spending their time deploying projects, and if even better, if they work, if they're useful, some of that work may be reusable elsewhere. And the nature of open source is such that that's a good thing. And that other people would maybe say, hey, I see you developed a code library that will parse parcel data so we can use it to measure property ownership and business licensing and resources available for small businesses in a different demographic breakdown. So you can combine data from other places, open data connectors, and so on. So if you've built one of the pieces that people need, you've done some work that they can reuse and, of course, give you credit, then 3 wonderful things happen. First of all, there's value in your civic volunteer contributions. Their creative works were valuable for having done them and become more valuable because other people recognize that and can use it. 2, your organization becomes that much more credible. Like, oh, go to that place, go to that GitHub repo. They're doing some cool stuff that is reusable. It's not, completely isolated to serve one purpose. It's documented, it's tested, it's testable. It's released in a license that is compatible with what we're doing, and so on. So if it's possible to spend that time and then get those 2 benefits, then the third one, you're enabling other people to make progress on their projects. And if you do that, then number 2, they're going to say, oh yeah, go to that. They'll tell others, go to that organization. They got some good reusable code that helped us out. But also the same sort of personal reward that comes from your project working can be extended to other people who will say, oh, now my project works because their project worked. So that's at least 3 good reasons to make your project reusable. This, I'm speaking in terms of code, of course, but a lot of things are reusable. We are not necessarily making food, but in the case of, like, if you make a component of a menu item, if you have a sauce or a seasoning mix or something, or a method to prepare something, and that works with a different set of elements that can all come together, and you're like, oh, this worked because of a joint venture. So one concept can be reused to enable another concept. Very clearly, the software world has mechanized that, but it's a fairly reasonable mindset to adopt if you're working on anything that might be the basis for collaboration with others, especially people you don't know. If our organization creates a tool or method or a library or whatever, and we imagine it being useful for others, we can document it. We can create generalized examples of it, maybe even collaborate with other individuals or organizations on their similar projects. So just like I said, and if you do that with intent, then you will think about things like, well, should I document this now or should I put it off into the future that will never come? So taking a moment and jotting down some documentation or some test cases. We like TDD, test-driven development. Some of the younger kids today do not care for it. They feel it's a waste of their valuable time because they may not understand the notion that other people will benefit from having these pre-existing tests, so that if they make changes to the code and the tests fail, look at that. It was already worth time spent. It helps make code maintainable. It helps make code releasable, yes, but it helps make it maintainable into the future, especially if you have transient teams. Translational teams are also a challenge. But if your teams come and go, cohorts of volunteers are there because they want to be. So if they decide they don't want to be and they're gone, code is left in an unknown state. Maybe a creative project is half done. If they're using tools that cannot be used by others because they're not free or easily available, then most of their work goes away. So there's value in taking the time up front to make things reusable, which includes making them testable and observable if possible, and documenting and so on, so that others may join in at some point, either during development or during updates or changes or continued development, as we say. So And then, the side benefit, like I said, number two, civic volunteer organizations will become more visible and more noteworthy even if they contribute to an ecosystem, if they are givers and they build things that can be used elsewhere. And something I see in some of the former Code for America brigades is that they'll tackle a local problem. Sometimes this is in partnership with a local entity, whether it's a city government or a non-government agency or somewhere in between. They'll work on a project that may have some sort of sponsorship or partnership when it comes to specifications or other support. So I can understand how the focus on a particular implementation and limiting the flexibility of it kind of makes sense, but it kind of doesn't also. If someone works on a project and it only works with Terraform and then Terraform goes away, you're stuck. So you should make sure it works with Terraform and Tofu. Same goes for, if you must have a particular shade of pigments, paints, pens, inks, whatever, for a visualization project, and you're doing it on, in the real world, not digitally. You should be aware that the supplier of your inks might go away, or keeping it secret will lead to others having to do extra work. So if you make things reusable, if you make them documented and clear, if your intent is to enable others to use your work, then everybody wins if you take these things into account. And your organization, if that's the way they function, the way they operate, you will become a little bit more interesting when it comes to outreach. Like, hey, would you like to work on one of our projects with us? Yeah, you guys have a good reputation. You guys are doing some good stuff and helping others with your policies and your outputs, so to speak. So yeah, I think it ends up being a long tail win for the effort up front. You should also make it last, as I've described many times over the last. This will be the episode 61, the last 60 episodes prior, and not so much episode 0, by the way. As people come and go from a particular organization, it is important to make projects sustainable if they are useful. So if people are using your work, if your team of 2 or 3 people that put together a cool library or a cool tool or even a cool document or a cool method or a visualization or any, whatever it is, they all decide to leave, but other people, other organizations, other projects are depending on that, then if it simply goes away, that's how the internet breaks, that's how the world falls apart. So making sure that project can persist in the absence of its original developers, creators, is important and sometimes critical. This is where the process and good habits come in handy. From the beginning, this is a great way to start, not put it off. Reducing technical debt early, with the transient cohort population especially, and contributions from newcomers is a good idea. So if you have people coming and going and they say, oh, I was going to do that later, but I'm departing now, so they leave technical debt behind. This can lead to a frustrating state of affairs if newcomers join a project and they're like, I don't even know where to begin. Well, we can start by trying to fix all the problems that the other people left behind that are, to do, to fix, missing. And I should point out that our projects are kind of in a initial state right now because no one wants to create user stories, and the value of the user story becomes apparent later. But if your cohort is all in the now, perhaps they will learn the hard way. But it is absolutely critical to make projects that will last, which means understanding how they're developed, because if you're not in there from the beginning and you have to join a project and you have no idea what's going on, well, let's just say history is important. It's important to understand history. Otherwise, you might have to repeat it a few times. And yes, I am paraphrasing George Santayana. These habits come in handy. There's just no question, unless you proactively wish to obscure, to make secret your work. If you have a secret recipe, and you work in a restaurant, you want to keep it secret, okay. If you are suddenly unavailable and people can no longer make that item, that's the way it goes. So if you have not made your secret sustainable into the future, you will, the word suffer might not be appropriate, but the consequences will be felt. And that's the way it is. So reduction of technical debt or debt of any kind. Technical, maybe, I don't know if there's creative debt. When there's creative debt, when you're writing a script for a movie and you forget about the discontinuities because you'll get to them later. And then you find movies come out and people say, there's all these plot holes. It is important to recognize the value of tackling things sooner rather than later. And in the case of open source projects, it's super important because, again, people are spending their volunteer time and their time must be valued. And so putting in some effort in exchange for their time and effort, it's a pretty reasonable trade. It's also a good habit. Projects, and these can be code or anything, built with the future in mind, are more likely to gain participants. So if you build good things, if you make good things, if you are an effective creative creator, I don't know how that would work. If you're good at stuff, or if you put in the time to get good and you release good stuff, other people will notice and they will want to be a part of creating, building, maintaining, deploying good stuff. And adopters of your technologies, of the projects you release, will find the same. Hey, this is really well thought out. Hey, I have a thing that could make it even better. Can I tell it to you? Yes. Can you make this change? It does look like a good idea. And hey, our project is assembled and constructed and is organized, documented, has test cases, and all the things that make your change an integration possibility rather easily. We won't break the world by making one change. There are projects that don't have any of those truths. I've been there. I've probably contributed in some negative way early in my career. But the bottom line is, if you want to make your project so that it is clear for people to participate in, reusable so that others may take advantage of your work, and vice versa. By the way, if you're a developer, you are standing on the shoulders of giants, as has been said. I know Linus Torvalds has used that Newton quote. If I have seen further, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants, is approximately the Newton quote. You should make it last. You should make your code last into the future so that if others have found that it's reusable and they make use of it and it's clear, well written, tested, useful, then it hopefully will stick around and others can take over if you've decided for whatever reason to not be a part of that project or development anymore. So, all that said, the make it rain component of our current and future programming is to talk about the specific things we're working on today. And again, infrastructure as code is sort of boring. There's not a lot to see during. So this is the current focus, though, is to be able to deploy our infrastructure as flexibly as possible so that we can benefit from special deals. Amazon Web Services offers a free year of a certain not great tier of various services, so we can do development with infrastructure there. We can use some fast machines if we decide our infrastructure needs some horsepower, and if we have some donations and sponsors that can support such things. If for some reason Microsoft decides that they would like to support us in some way, we should be able to move our infrastructure or parts of it to Microsoft. And the way we do that should be clear to someone who wants to join our organization or participate in a project or just help out with a pull request or some other contribution. So it's essential that we have these elements of our projects in place so that we can deploy, test, fix, redeploy, and enable additional work easily. Yeah, I wrote that out ahead of time. But so the bottom line is the infrastructure as code, which is a modern headache that we all must endure. The declarative HCL languages, HCL, Hashi configuration language, is it, or is HashiCorp language? I think it's Hashi configuration language. It's not my favorite, but it is widely used. If you go to our GitHub repos, you will not find our infrastructure as code, project there yet because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a thing I've worked on previously. So I'm adapting it to our needs here. It will be making use of Terraform initially, but as I've mentioned, it must be able to work with OpenTofu. And really, so Terraform and OpenTofu have already bumped heads. They've locked horns, as they say. There's an accusation that OpenTofu may have pulled some code from the Terraform repository after the license changed and included it in their open source fork. So the accusations are being hashed out, so to speak. But if HashiCorp gets bought, and apparently HashiCorp, which recently went public, is shopping around for buyers. So if they get acquired and that company decides to just shut down Terraform as a free, quote unquote, free set of tools, that would be horrible. But OpenTofu is there for exactly that reason. So there's some people are looking down the road and making sure that there are tools that can be used on existing infrastructure as code projects or deployments or libraries, however you want to look at it. So we will need to look at OpenTofu as well. So that has come to pass after I was working on my infrastructure configuration, setup, whatever. So making it work with OpenTofu will be essential. And then we really also need to look at other possibilities just in case. So there's a platform called Palomi. I think I wrote Palomi. I think it's Palomi. Another possibility, I've taken a look at it. I'm not a huge fan, but the infrastructure as code component of it's sort of the foundation of the foundation. Like we're wetting the soil, the dirt, and preparing to pour the concrete. So these are essential steps, and not that doing this wrong will break the world, but certainly not doing it well enough. I'm not asking for perfection for myself, but not doing it well enough is a crack in the foundation, right? So fixing that will require extra work, and it might cause other problems down the road. So these are things that if you can do them as correctly as possible or as maintainably as possible early on, the value will be felt later. It'll be realized later when things are just a little bit easier to do. So that's our infrastructure as code. So that will be available. I doubt very much I'll do an entire episode on that because it is a little bit boring. It is literally a recipe. It's not, see, code, at least if you write a program, it does things. Infrastructure as code is literally a recipe. Add 2 EC2s, 1 load balancer, 1 database, 3 IP addresses, whatever. You're just 5 VPCs. You're literally just adding components and connecting them together. So it's not particularly interesting to the casual listener. It's an essential thing. It has to be done. And also, if we don't continue to use cloud in the traditional way, well, who knows? We might get bare metal servers that we can use here in the Vegas area. We should be able to turn our infrastructure into a normal bare metal deployment. So that's something that we have to be aware of as well. Is if somebody said, "Hey, I got 5 servers in a rack," not a country, in a rack, in a server farm here in my facility, we'd like to donate the use of these for your various projects. That would be great. Now we can recreate our infrastructure there on the bare metal. So we would control things like which machine has the database, how the networking is routing, and so on and so on. So being aware of our configuration will be not as interesting to all of our volunteers, but it will enable a lot of the components where we need to deploy software and interact with people using the talents, the creative works, the diverse contributions from all of our civic volunteers, whether part of our organization or not. So there's sort of a little bit of responsibility up front to enable other people to make their time valuable or to recognize the value of it. And the outreach continues. So this is probably more interesting to the casual listener. So we have our weekly office hours on Thursdays in the evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time each week, unless they're canceled for scheduling conflicts and whatnot. There's a 30-minute window that we hold open. And so 30 minutes every week, if nobody shows up, starts to become a little bit of an issue, so that if another item has to be scheduled, like, okay, well, there'll be another office hours next week. So that happens from time to time. So 6 p.m. to 6:30 is the window. If someone decides they want to jump on at 6:29 p.m. Pacific time, then the meeting stays open, right? So we can have a discussion. If it turns into a lively, interesting chat, other people want to join in, whatever. At this time, it's a 30-minute window. We tried a 60-minute window, but there were a couple times when people did participate and other times they did not. It became clear that people jump in right around the starting time. They don't wait until 59 minutes later. So a 29 or a 30-minute window, but a 30 minutes is pretty fair. And this is just a recurring open meeting. Anyone can join in. We use a calendar embedded in our website at this time. When we get Smart Social up and running, we will use our Smart Calendar to do that. But you can see when an event is canceled, if it does get canceled, and the link for the video chat is there. We don't record them. So there you go. So you can sit in anytime you want. We have our monthly board meeting of our directors on the fourth Thursday during the office hours. So in that case, it will last more than 30 minutes, most likely, and anyone can sit in. So you can join in on the office hours each week, any week you want, or all of them. And you're welcome to sit in on our board meetings and see what's going on. That's part of our outreach. We are inviting civic volunteers from other places to join in on our projects, while at the same time exploring some open standard ways to perform project and participant discovery. So if you are working on a project on the East Coast or in Middle America or wherever, how do people find your project, and how do they find you? And how do we connect projects so that they are reusable, so that people know that you're already doing some work that we could make use of, and it's all open source and we can help you back in some way? So there exists an infrastructure to do this, and it's called description of a project and friend of a friend. So DOPE and FOF. These are RDF as XML, or they can also be, this will probably be something we look at is because nobody likes XML anymore. I don't know why. We can look at some sort of, I think there's been an effort to use YAML as an option. But if we can make use of that and some simple spidering technology, so that's where I pointed to Project Act earlier. So Project Act will start deploying a spider, and we'll start to gather places where they have included a DOPE file, description of a project. Now, if I have a website, which I do, innovateforvegas.org, and we have a set of projects, which we do, which are not presently on our website, but they're in our GitHub organization repositories, right? If I put a DOPE file in our repositories for each project, it will be useful, it will be discoverable, it will point to itself in some places, right? The repository is here. It can also point to mailing lists and other features, so we can implement those. But it's essentially a standard manifest of properties about a project. We can also put that on our website. So a crawler, a spider, can go through and say, oh, okay, you are working on 15 different projects, and here are the repositories. And in our case, we have an overview project and then some components. So you have to, that number is not a raw number, or 18 is a raw number. It's not an indication of the different things we're doing. They're related. So if we can find these DOPE files, which can be deployed on a website or on the GitHub repo or both, and identify where projects are, okay, now we have some idea of who's working on what. If you have a website and you deploy the DOPE file there and it points to your GitHub or GitLab or some other place, as long as we can find that DOPE file, we can then find the other places. Oh, I got to change where my repo is. Next time we come through and scan those dope files like an RSS feed, we'll say, oh, okay, new location. So as long as we synchronize a database of some sort somewhere, and anyone can do this, right? So the nice thing is anyone can have a spider that goes through and reads these files, just like RSS feeds. So you're not committing to, I'm only going to include my projects in Democracy Labs directory. You can as well, but you can also publish your projects on your own website in the standard form so they can be found. So Project Act will drive the current approach to the dope schema. RDF schema was published in 2004. It's been around for a while. And Apache uses it. Apache Foundation uses it for their projects and so on. So it is around. It does work. Those who are feeling like the old ways don't matter, don't know how to stand on the shoulders of giants. The wheel has been invented in this case. We need not reinvent it. So filling in some dope files, adding them to your repos should be pretty straightforward. We can start simply. It's an extensible set of features. And if we use FOF, friend of a friend, we can connect different organizations and different contributors, participants, so that we can actually discover the people and the organizations and the groups that are working on these things. So once we can start discovering people, we don't have to wonder if you're on the Discord or if your organization is still alive. Guess what? If that dope file disappears, that's a pretty good sign. So once we are able to find people in an automated and re-automated way, that is, you can run the spiders all day. You can probably, I'm going to guess, if there's like 100 websites or 100 places to find dope files, that it would take a minute to find them, parse through them, update the database. If there are additional references, you add them on. If you have to go check some GitHub repos, okay, so you start adding a little bit of time. If each of those 100 civic volunteer organizations, former brigades and otherwise, each have 100 projects, now you're still talking like 10,000 things to look at, right? So, okay, that's still doable in minutes, hour. You can do that every day. FOF, we want to find people, like who's working on what. And ideally, as part of Project Act, what we would love to see is, instead of, do you want to join our organization? Like, we are not inviting people to join Innovate for Vegas to work on our projects. You don't have to. You can work on our projects anywhere you are, and from anywhere. You can join our organization on GitHub. You don't have to call yourself a member of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. We don't really have a formal membership list. It's really about who contributes to projects. We're using GitHub. We're using GitHub to track projects in general. So even if it's a purely real-world art, visualization, creative work project, we keep track of it in GitHub, so we can keep track of the participants, so we can give proper attribution so people can find you, etc. So it's a synchronizing platform for that. But if we are able to find people, suppose, and if we have some additional infrastructure in place, which we're talking about right now, if we can say the Open Transit project at Innovate for Vegas Foundation, here's the project, here's the dope, so here's the repository and the maintainers and all that information that's in there. So you can discover this project in any number of ways in different places, depending on who's using the spider data. Say, okay, Open Transit, innovateforvegas.org. They need help with this one open issue on the GTFS PubSub service in this repo, which is part of this project. Now, how do I ask for help from the broader civic volunteer community? It could be the entire open source community, which I never like using the word community, but we're coming to the end of the show, so we'll not get too creative. So if I want to advertise, hey, I just need someone to look over my shoulder at this. Does this look right? Do you know how to solve this? Do you know where this piece of information is? So one open issue, you write out the issue. So you use the tools. Sure, you can go to Reddit. You can post on some news group if those still exist. They do. And you can cast a net, perhaps. But what if there was a way to publish these issues or descriptions of, maybe it's not as formal as an issue, maybe it's a quick question or something. What if there's a pool of people connected through their FOF network, the graph is drawn. What if these people are willing to tackle a problem? Oh, you just need like 20 minutes of my time. I can help out with that. Do I have to join your organization? No. You don't have to look at the the participant requirements. We just need a pull request, essentially. So you're advertising for people to make pull requests, but you have a particular set of skills, and you're willing to contribute to projects of others, and maybe they'll do the same for you. So if we can connect civic volunteers who have otherwise been left with their sails flagging after the Code for America departure, the sunsetting, the rug pulling, if you will, of the brigade program, and anyone else who is impacted by that. So there are people that are willing to do this, but are maybe feeling as though they are no longer able. So we'll see if we can start connecting with people. So the ACT, Project ACT, is something that Mary, who's another director here at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, she's also an integral part of the Open Fresno organization and what will eventually be Open Sacramento. It used to be Code for Sac. It might be Open Sacramento. They may be joining forces. I'm not quite sure. I haven't talked to her about that one. But Mary and I had this conversation probably about a year ago now. We were talking about how when Code for Vegas was an independent organization, we were it must have been after now. It must have been no. It was in it had to be over a year ago. So it was when we were filing our nonprofit. I'm sorry, we were forming our nonprofit and we were going to apply for a 501c3. We had already been given the push off, the heave-ho by Code for America. So there was a rumor going around that other brigades were jealous of us, that why do they get to be independent? So we said, what if we enable people and we help them? We can have a sort of a central discussion. So I said we could call it the ACT, Project ACT, as the Autonomous Cohort Transformation Project. So each cohort that is presently under the thumb of the Central Planning Code for America organization could break away and go through a process appropriate for their state, whatever the laws are, for forming an independent nonprofit entity, and then become either a fiscally sponsored agency of some sort, or file the 1023-EZ, become a standalone 501c3 public charity. So we could take what we've learned in this journey thus far and share it with others and help them become an independent, supportable, sponsorable with tax exemption organization that could continue what they wanted to accomplish in the first place with some self-determination, some autonomy, right? Autonomous cohort transformation. So the Project ACT notion was on the table. And then when Code for America pulled the rug, so at the end of December 2023, brigades are officially done, although that may still not be 100% true, but nothing, when things are unclear, things are going well. So at some point we said, and at some point the Alliance of Civic Technologists started pulling together, and they had their first meeting in July of 2023 to discuss forming the Alliance of Civic Technologists to recreate the top-down organizational structure and fiscal sponsorship features or whatever. They wanted to get the band back together without Code for America, is my understanding. And a lot of the organizations were being fiscally sponsored as they broke away from Code for America. They were fiscally sponsored by Open Collective Foundation. Other brigades were doing other things. Some of them are not fiscally sponsored, I guess. It's a cacophony of different circumstances. And so I said, hey, Mary, maybe we should reboot Project ACT, and so we can start talking to people about what happens if and when the ACT effort collapses, because you have a lot of people trying to have one meeting and create one organizational structure. And I said, I just think it makes more sense to create a way for independent cohorts autonomously to autonomously functioning independent cohorts to pursue what they want to work on locally, but still collaborate, globally, and be able to find each other and discuss and support each other with collaboration and contributions of time and energies and expertise and so on. So all of this makes sense to me. So I may be alone in that. So Project Act still exists. Our repository is linked in this episode. Project Act on the GitHub. We have a separate GitHub org, but it's part of Innovate for Vegas. That is, anyway, you get it. So everything we do for Project Act will be an Innovate for Vegas project, but others can contribute to that as well, just like anything else. And the idea is to establish this dope and faux infrastructure. It's just like an RSS file. It's an XML file. You add it to the root of your project, the root of your website, the root of your backyard garden, wherever you put it, so that we can start spidering and discovering who's working on what and who is still working on what, which is critical. We can assemble this database of contacts and projects and determine whether there is something that someone is doing halfway around the world that could be, because it's the same basic idea that you're working on, hey, maybe we should work together. None of us has enough volunteer contributors. Those days seem to have been in the past. They could be in the future too. If we help each other, we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish by tackling the commonalities. So Project Act will aim to try to connect people. So autonomous cohort transformation is one part of it. The autonomous cohort tessellation is a mosaic. That's what a tessellation is, a mosaic of, in this case, it'll be projects and people and groups and organizations, but we'll have a tessellation of autonomous cohorts so we can figure out who's working on what, so we can try to save time and move forward, even though none of us really has enough people spending their time and energies on effectively advancing individual causes. And if we make projects that are reusable and that are sustained and will last, maybe we can make the most of people who are willing to contribute their time as civic volunteers, no matter where they are. And that is the current state of affairs. These are active today things that will help us advance our various projects. Our projects will attempt to, at this time, they will fit together. That's by design. So by implementation, we'll see. But our projects fit together. So something I've noticed in other former brigades and so on is that the projects tended to be fairly vertical. They didn't necessarily fit together. It's not totally clear that they were trying to make things reusable between projects. Methodology, development, best practices for that organization, et cetera, that's one thing. But the work that you're actually doing, can we think across projects? And again, what are other people doing? How can we make our stuff reusable, integratable, and so a point of collaboration with other civic volunteer organizations and even others out in the world? So we can think of the bigger picture. And if we and you can be a part of that bigger picture, that will help us become a bigger part of the bigger picture. Hopefully that all makes sense. And on that note, I will thank you for listening as always. Visit our website, innovateforvegas.org. We have a donate button there if you want. We are a completely renamed, officially, since March 11th, I think it was. Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a 501c3 public charity. We are a tax-exempt organization. You can find us in the IRS tax-exempt organization database. We are a licensed, a state business license. We do have one for the state of Nevada as a nonprofit corporation. We are going to have our board member election of sorts. We need to add at least one, ideally 2 to 3 more board members to our board. Our co-founding board member, Sean Looker, also the co-founder of the original Code for Vegas, has stepped down or is stepping down to pursue life and family and so on. He has not lived in Las Vegas for a very long time. he was instrumental in getting everything up and running and answering some key questions and participating in some key discussions. So he leaves with our best wishes and an empty chair. So hopefully we can fill that soon. And all of our other project work continues, and you will hear about it on this podcast, more so about accomplishment than aspiration in our future episodes, as I've said. And we will consider, ponder, and possibly deploy some video so we can start talking about co-working, collaboration on projects in remote locations. Maybe we'll have office hours that are recorded. We can have discussions that are streamed, et cetera, et cetera. So the internet is a crazy place. Thank you for listening.